Welcome to Aber Memorabili, from Time Beyond Memory. I'm Drake,
And I'm Holly. Where ancient wisdom meets modern minds.
brought to you by the most ancient anamnetic order of Trikala for seekers everywhere. Whether you're walking with us or simply curious about the path,
Each episode, we explore the hidden patterns that connect philosophy, consciousness, and human transformation.
drawing from traditions east and west, old and new, familiar and forgotten.
Because some truths exist outside of time, waiting to be remembered, not learned.
On this episode, we're diving into something rather extraordinary: the mysterious appearance of identical geometric patterns across every culture, every tradition, every corner of human civilization. From the pyramids of Egypt to Tibetan mandalas, from Islamic tessellations to the golden spirals in nature itself.
Drake, I've always been fascinated by this phenomenon. How is it that a Buddhist monk in Tibet creates the same fundamental patterns as an Islamic artist in medieval Spain, or an indigenous shaman in the Americas? They had no contact with each other, no shared Pinterest boards to reference.
Exactly. And it goes even deeper than that. These aren't just decorative choices. Every tradition seems to believe these shapes carry profound meaning. That geometry itself is somehow sacred, a language that speaks directly to something within us.
Or perhaps something that speaks through us. I remember the first time I really noticed this pattern. I was looking at a photograph of the rose window at Notre Dame, and then later that same day, I saw an almost identical pattern in a Native American sand painting. The similarity was uncanny.
That's the thing. Once you start seeing these patterns, you can't unsee them. They're everywhere. The hexagon appears in Chinese philosophy, in Hebrew mysticism, in Celtic art. The spiral shows up from ancient Ireland to Aboriginal Australia. The flower of life pattern, 6 intersecting circles, appears in Egyptian temples, Japanese shrines, and medieval European manuscripts.
Let's start with something fundamental. What do we even mean when we say sacred geometry?
Well, at its core, it's the belief that certain geometric patterns and mathematical ratios are fundamental to the structure of reality itself, and that by understanding and working with these patterns, we can somehow align ourselves with the deeper order of the cosmos.
Right, it's not just pretty patterns. These traditions are suggesting that geometry is the blueprint of creation itself. Plato famously said, God geometrizes continually.
And he wasn't alone in that thinking. Pythagoras before him built an entire school around the idea that number and geometry were the keys to understanding reality. All is number, he declared. For the Pythagoreans, geometric relationships weren't just describing reality, they were reality.
The Pythagorean school was fascinating in this regard. They had different levels of initiation, and the deeper mysteries were all about number and proportion. They discovered that musical harmony comes from mathematical ratios, and they extrapolated from this that all harmony, cosmic, social, personal, follows mathematical laws.
They even had a secret symbol, the pentagram, the 5-pointed star. For them, it embodied the golden ratio in its very structure. Every line segment in a pentagram is in golden ratio proportion to the others. They saw it as a symbol of health and wholeness.
This brings us to one of the most famous examples, the golden ratio, phi, 1.618, and so on. That mysterious proportion that appears in everything from nautilus shells to galaxy spirals, from the proportions of the human face to the arrangement of seeds in a sunflower.
The Fibonacci sequence, manifesting in nature. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, each number the sum of the 2 before it. And as the sequence progresses, the ratio between consecutive numbers approaches phi, the golden ratio.
What strikes me is how this isn't just mathematical coincidence. Ancient architects deliberately used these proportions. The Parthenon in Athens, the Great Pyramid at Giza, they're all built according to these ratios.
And it wasn't just monuments. Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man, showing the ideal human proportions, is entirely based on sacred geometric principles. The human body itself becomes a kind of geometric testament, arms outstretched forming a square, the navel at the center of a perfect circle.
Da Vinci was obsessed with these proportions. He wrote, "The proportions of the human body are such that the distance from the soles of the feet to the top of the head is to the distance from the navel to the top of the head, as the distance from the navel to the top of the head is to the distance from the navel to the soles of the feet. Classic golden ratio.
And it goes even deeper. The proportions of our DNA molecule, the spiral of our inner ear, the proportions of our facial features when we're considered most beautiful, all golden ratio relationships.
Speaking of spirals and circles, let's talk about one of the most universal sacred geometric forms, the mandala. Carl Jung spent decades studying these, didn't he?
He did indeed. Jung noticed that patients would spontaneously draw mandala-like circular patterns during therapy, especially during periods of psychological integration. He came to believe that the mandala represents the self, the totality of the psyche, both conscious and unconscious.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Jung discovered that these spontaneous drawings from Swiss patients in the 20th century matched sacred diagrams from Tibet, from Hindu temples, from Native American sand paintings. People with no knowledge of these traditions were producing the same fundamental patterns.
Jung called it evidence of the collective unconscious, that beneath our individual minds lies a shared layer of human consciousness that speaks in symbols and geometric forms. The mandala, he said, is an archetype of wholeness.
He wrote something beautiful about this. He said, I sketched every morning in a notebook a small circular drawing, a mandala, which seemed to correspond to my inner situation at the time. Only gradually did I discover what the mandala really is. The self, the wholeness of the personality, which, if all goes well, is harmonious.
The word mandala itself means container of essence in Sanskrit. In Tibetan Buddhism, monks spend weeks creating incredibly intricate mandalas from colored sand, only to sweep them away upon completion.
A meditation on impermanence, but also something more. The act of creating the mandala is said to purify the space, to create a kind of energetic blueprint that affects consciousness itself. The geometry becomes a tool for transformation.
The Kalachakra mandala, one of the most complex in Tibetan Buddhism, contains 722 deities arranged in precise geometric relationships. Each position, each color, each symbol has meaning. It's like a map of consciousness rendered in geometric form.
This idea that geometric patterns can affect consciousness appears everywhere. Islamic art, with its incredible geometric tessellations, serves a similar purpose. Since representational art was often avoided, Muslim artists developed the most sophisticated geometric patterns in human history.
And they weren't just decorative. These patterns, the endless interlacing stars and polygons, are meant to lead the viewer into contemplation of the infinite nature of Allah. The patterns have no beginning, no end. They could theoretically extend forever in all directions.
There's something meditative about following those patterns with your eyes. They seem to quiet the analytical mind and open something else.
The mathematicians of medieval Islam were incredibly sophisticated in their understanding. They knew about quasi-crystalline patterns 500 years before Western science discovered them. The patterns at the Alhambra in Spain contain mathematical relationships that weren't formally described by Western mathematics until the 20th century.
And they achieved all this using just a compass and straight edge. No computers, no complex calculations, just an intuitive understanding of geometric relationships and infinite patience.
This brings us to the Platonic solids, the 5 three-dimensional shapes where every face is the same regular polygon, and every vertex is identical. The tetrahedron, cube, octahedron, dodecahedron, and icosahedron.
Plato associated each with an element, the stable cube with earth, the sharp tetrahedron with fire, the flowing icosahedron with water, the mobile octahedron with air.
And the dodecahedron?
That 12-faced form he associated with the cosmos as a whole. He actually wrote that the gods used the dodecahedron for arranging the constellations on the whole heaven.
What's remarkable is that modern science has found these same shapes at the fundamental level of reality. Water molecules arrange themselves in tetrahedral patterns. Carbon atoms form perfect geometric lattices. Viruses often take the shape of icosahedrons. Even space itself might be dodecahedral at the largest scales, according to some cosmological models.
The discovery that many viruses are icosahedral was shocking to biologists. Why would a virus, with no conscious design process, naturally form into one of Plato's perfect solids. It turns out it's the most efficient way to create a closed shell from identical protein units.
So the ancients were onto something real. These aren't arbitrary human inventions. They're patterns that nature itself uses to build reality.
Johannes Kepler, the great astronomer, was obsessed with the Platonic solids. He initially tried to explain the orbits of the planets by nesting the five solids inside each other. He was wrong about the specifics, but his intuition that cosmic order follows geometric principles led him to discover the laws of planetary motion.
This brings us to something fascinating: cymatics, the study of visible sound and vibration. Have you seen those experiments where they vibrate sand or water at different frequencies?
Oh, yes. The sand arranges itself into perfect geometric patterns. Different frequencies create different patterns. Low frequencies make simple patterns. Higher frequencies create incredibly complex mandalas. It's like watching sound become geometry.
Ernst Chladni first demonstrated this in the 18th century, but the implications are profound. If sound can create geometric patterns in matter, and if the universe began with what scientists call the Big Bang, essentially a cosmic vibration, then perhaps all form, all geometry emerges from vibration.
Hans Jenny took this even further in the 20th century. He showed that vibrating water creates patterns that look exactly like cellular structures, like living organisms. Some of his cymatic patterns are indistinguishable from forms we see in nature: tortoise shells, leopard spots, biological cells.
That would explain why so many traditions associate sound with creation. In the beginning was the word, the Hindu concept of Om as the primordial sound, the Pythagorean idea of the music of the spheres.
The Aboriginal Australians have the concept of the songlines, paths across the land that record the creation of the world through song. They believe the land itself was sung into existence, that geographical features are frozen music.
And it might explain why certain geometric patterns appear universally. If consciousness itself has a vibrational quality, perhaps we're naturally attuned to recognize and create these patterns. They resonate with something fundamental in our being.
This connects to what the order teaches about anamnesis, that we're not learning new things, but remembering what we've always known. Maybe these geometric patterns are part of that deep memory.
There's actually scientific support for this idea. Studies have shown that infants before any cultural conditioning show preferences for symmetrical patterns and the golden ratio. We seem to be born with an innate recognition of these forms.
Newborns just hours old will look longer at faces that are proportioned according to the golden ratio. They've had no time to learn this preference. It seems to be hardwired into human consciousness.
And then there's the flower of life, that pattern of overlapping circles that creates a kind of geometric seed for all other patterns. It contains within it the blueprint for the Platonic solids, the golden ratio, everything.
The oldest known example was found in the Temple of Osiris in Egypt, burned into the granite with incredible precision. But versions appear in China, in India, in medieval Europe. Leonardo da Vinci studied it intensively.
Some say it represents the pattern of creation itself, how the one becomes many through geometric division. The first circle represents unity, then it divides, creating vesica piscis, the almond shape formed by two overlapping circles.
The Vesica Piscis itself is sacred geometry. Its proportions relate to the square root of 3, and it appears in Christian art as the aureole around Christ and the saints. It's the shape formed by two circles whose centers lie on each other's circumference.
It's also the basic shape of the human eye, and symbolically, it represents the intersection of two worlds: heaven and earth, matter and spirit, conscious and unconscious.
The entire Gothic cathedral tradition used the Vesica Piscis as a fundamental proportion. The pointed arch that defines Gothic architecture is essentially two arcs of a Vesica Piscis. The builders believed this shape had spiritual power, that it drew the eye and the soul upward.
Speaking of cathedral builders, they were part of a tradition that encoded massive amounts of geometric knowledge into stone. Chartres Cathedral in France is essentially a geometric textbook written in architecture. The labyrinth on its floor is a perfect geometric meditation tool.
That labyrinth is fascinating. It's not a maze. There's only one path. Walking it becomes a meditation. a journey to the center and back out again. The geometry guides the body, which guides the mind, which affects consciousness.
This is something the Order understands deeply. That physical movement through geometric patterns can create shifts in awareness. Though, of course, the specific practices are part of the inner work that students discover.
Speaking of intersections between geometry and consciousness, let's talk about how modern physics has discovered sacred geometry at the quantum level. String theory, for instance, suggests that the fundamental particles are actually tiny vibrating strings, and their different vibrations create different particles.
Just like cymatics on the smallest possible scale.
Exactly, and these strings are theorized to vibrate in spaces with very specific geometric properties. The mathematics requires extra dimensions beyond our normal three, and these dimensions are thought to be curled up in complex geometric shapes called Calabi-Yau manifolds.
So, even at the cutting edge of physics, we're finding that reality might be fundamentally geometric. The ancients who said geometry was the language of the gods might have been more literally correct than we imagined.
Buckminster Fuller, the visionary architect and philosopher, said, "Everything you've learned in school as obvious becomes less and less obvious as you begin to study the universe. For example, there are no solids in the universe. There's not even a suggestion of a solid. There are no absolute continuums. There are no surfaces. There are no straight lines."
Fuller developed the concept of synergetic geometry, looking at how nature actually builds things through tensegrity, through balanced forces rather than solid structures. His geodesic domes are based on this principle, distributing stress through geometric patterns rather than solid supports.
This brings up something profound. If these patterns are built into the fabric of reality, and if our consciousness naturally resonates with them, then working with sacred geometry becomes a way of aligning ourselves with the cosmos.
That's exactly what traditions worldwide have always claimed. The Tibetan Buddhist creating a mandala isn't just making art, they're aligning their consciousness with cosmic patterns. The Islamic artist creating geometric tessellations is participating in the infinite creativity of Allah.
The cathedral builders of medieval Europe encoded these ratios into their architecture not just for beauty, but because they believed it would create spaces that elevated consciousness, that brought people closer to the divine.
And maybe they were right. Studies have shown that being in spaces built with golden ratio proportions has measurable effects on the brain, increasing alpha waves associated with relaxation and creativity.
There's a study from the University of Toronto that found people consistently rate rectangles with golden ratio proportions as most pleasing, even when they don't consciously know what they're looking at. The preference seems to operate below the level of conscious awareness.
There's something about these proportions that just feels right to us. Musicians have discovered that the most pleasing musical intervals correspond to simple mathematical ratios. The octave is 2 to 1, the perfect fifth is 3 to 2.
Pythagoras discovered this 2,500 years ago with his monochord experiments. He showed that harmony in music comes from mathematical relationships. "There is geometry in the humming of the strings," he said. "There is music in the spacing of the spheres."
And this isn't just ancient speculation. Modern astronomers have discovered that planetary orbits often settle into resonant ratios, mathematical relationships that create stability over millions of years. Jupiter's moons, for instance, orbit in perfect 4 to 2 to 1 ratios.
So the music of the spheres isn't just poetry, it's physics.
Even our solar system shows these patterns. The spacing of planetary orbits follows patterns remarkably close to musical ratios. The asteroid belt sits at a position that would complete a perfect octave sequence if there were a planet there.
This universal presence of geometric patterns raises a fascinating question. Are we discovering these patterns in nature, or are we projecting them onto nature because our brains are wired to see them?
Maybe it's both. Maybe consciousness and cosmos mirror each other. As above, so below, as the Hermetic tradition says.
That phrase comes from the Emerald Tablet, one of the foundational texts of Western esotericism. That which is below is like that which is above, and that which is above is like that which is below. It suggests that the patterns we see in the cosmos are reflected in the microcosm of human consciousness.
The full passage is even more intriguing. That which is below is like that which is above, and that which is above is like that which is below, to accomplish the miracles of the one thing. It's suggesting that understanding these correspondences gives us creative power.
This might explain why sacred geometry has such a powerful effect on us. When we contemplate these patterns, we're not just looking at pretty shapes. We're recognizing something fundamental about the nature of reality and our place in it.
The order teaches that certain practices can awaken this recognition, though, of course, the specific methods are part of the inner work. But even without formal training, anyone can begin to notice these patterns.
Start with nature. Look at the spiral of a shell, the hexagons in a honeycomb, the branching patterns of trees and rivers and blood vessels. They all follow mathematical rules, fractal geometries that repeat at different scales.
Fractals are another example of sacred geometry hiding in plain sight. These self-similar patterns that repeat at every scale, they're everywhere in nature. Coastlines, clouds, mountain ranges, even the structure of our lungs and circulatory system.
Benoit Mandelbrot, who coined the term fractal, said, "Clouds are not spheres, mountains are not cones, coastlines are not circles, and bark is not smooth, nor does lightning travel in a straight line. Nature uses fractal geometry, not the simplified geometry we learned in school."
The Mandelbrot set, that famous fractal that looks like a Buddha or a beetle depending on how you see it, contains infinite complexity. You can zoom into it forever and keep finding new patterns, new worlds of detail, yet it's generated by an incredibly simple mathematical formula.
And yet these complex fractal patterns emerge from simple rules repeated over and over, just like the complex geometric patterns in Islamic art emerge from simple compass and straight-edge constructions repeated and rotated.
There's a lesson there about how complexity emerges from simplicity, how the infinite can be contained in the finite.
The Hindu and Buddhist concept of Indra's net captures this beautifully. Imagine an infinite net with a jewel at every intersection, and each jewel reflects all the other jewels. Infinite recursion, infinite interconnection. It's essentially describing a fractal universe thousands of years before we had the mathematics to describe it.
This takes us to one of the deepest aspects of sacred geometry, its relationship to consciousness itself. Many traditions suggest that the human energy system follows geometric patterns. The chakras, for instance, are often depicted as geometric forms, lotus flowers with specific numbers of petals.
Each chakra has its own geometric symbol. The root chakra is a square, representing earth and stability. The sacral chakra is a crescent moon. The solar plexus is a downward pointing triangle, and so on, creating a geometric map of consciousness ascending through the body.
The Merkaba in Jewish mysticism, that three-dimensional Star of David, is said to be a vehicle for consciousness, a geometric field that surrounds the human body.
The word Merkaba itself breaks down into three parts. Mir means light, Ka means spirit, and Ba means body. It's describing a geometric integration of light, spirit, and body. The three aspects the order works with, though they call them the three trunks.
Similar concepts appear worldwide. The Chinese concept of qi flowing through geometric pathways in the body, the Norse runes, which are essentially geometric symbols encoding cosmic principles.
Even modern neuroscience has found that the brain's neural networks follow specific geometric patterns. The grid cells in our hippocampus that help us navigate literally create hexagonal coordinate systems in our minds.
So we navigate reality using sacred geometry built into our neurons.
Which brings us back to Jung's observation. These patterns aren't just out there in the world. They're in here, in consciousness itself. The mandala emerges spontaneously from the psyche because the psyche itself is patterned on geometric principles.
There's something both humbling and empowering about this. Humbling because it suggests we're part of patterns much larger than ourselves. Empowering because it means we have access to the same creative principles that shape galaxies and atoms.
The order sometimes speaks about this as remembering rather than learning. The patterns are already within us, waiting to be recognized, waiting to be activated.
And once you start seeing them, they're everywhere. The spiral staircase of DNA, the geodesic patterns in Buckminster Fuller's domes, the hexagonal columns of basalt at the Giant's Causeway. Even the periodic table of elements follows geometric patterns.
I love that example of the Giant's Causeway. Nature creating perfect hexagonal columns through simple cooling patterns in lava. No conscious designer. just physics following geometric laws?
Or is there no conscious designer? This is where sacred geometry becomes truly mysterious. Why should mathematics and geometry work at all? Why should the universe be comprehensible to minds that evolved on one small planet?
Einstein called this the most incomprehensible thing about the universe, that it's comprehensible. And not just comprehensible, but comprehensible through geometry and mathematics.
Eugene Wigner wrote about the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics in describing nature. There's no reason it should work as well as it does, unless there's some deep connection between mind and cosmos.
Max Tegmark has proposed that the universe doesn't just have mathematical properties, it is mathematics. That physical reality is literally a mathematical structure, and we're self-aware substructures within that mathematics.
It's a mind-bending idea, but it would explain why mathematics and geometry are so effective at describing reality. They're not describing it, they are it.
Which brings us full circle to why these patterns appear in every tradition. Perhaps every culture has discovered them independently because they're discovering something real, the actual structure of reality that underlies appearances.
The Sufi tradition has a beautiful saying: God is beautiful and loves beauty. They see the geometric patterns in Islamic art as a way of participating in divine creativity.
And the Gothic cathedral builders believed their geometric constructions were a form of prayer, that by building according to sacred proportions, they were creating earthly reflections of heavenly realities.
Even modern architects like Le Corbusier used the golden ratio extensively. His modular system was entirely based on human proportions and the golden ratio. He believed architecture should be based on the mathematics of the human body.
Frank Lloyd Wright, too, used sacred geometry principles. His designs often incorporated the golden rectangle, and he spoke about architecture as frozen music. Again, that connection between geometry and harmony.
There's something profound about that, using the proportions of the human form to create spaces for humans to inhabit. It's like we're creating environments that resonate with our deepest nature.
And perhaps that's the real power of sacred geometry. It's not about abstract mathematics or mystical beliefs. It's about recognizing and working with the patterns that connect us to the cosmos, that remind us we're not separate from nature but expressions of it.
The order teaches that transformation requires alignment, aligning our individual patterns with cosmic patterns. Sacred geometry provides a map for that alignment.
Though, of course, the map is not the territory. Looking at geometric patterns isn't the same as embodying them. That requires practice, dedication, the kind of systematic work the order guides students through.
But even for those not on a formal path, there's value in recognizing these patterns. Every time you see the spiral of a galaxy echoed in the spiral of water down a drain, you're witnessing the unity that underlies diversity.
Every time you notice the same angles in a crystal that you see in a flower, you're recognizing the geometric language of nature.
And maybe, just maybe, you're remembering something you've always known but forgot. That you're not separate from these patterns but part of them. That the same forces that shape stars and atoms shape consciousness itself.
That's the real sacred geometry. Not just shapes on paper or stone, but the living patterns that connect all things. The geometry that lives in our breath, our heartbeat, our thoughts.
The ancient Greek philosopher Proclus wrote, "Geometry existed before creation, is co-eternal with the mind of God, is God's thinking." Whether you believe in God or not, there's something profound about the idea that geometry is fundamental to existence itself.
In our conversation today, we've traveled from ancient pyramids to quantum physics, from Tibetan mandalas to Islamic tessellations, and everywhere we found the same truth. Geometry is the language of creation.
Whether you call it sacred or simply structural, these patterns are the architecture of reality. And by understanding them, we understand something essential about ourselves and our place in the cosmos.
The order often reminds us that we're not studying these patterns from the outside. We're expressions of them. Our bodies, our consciousness, our very existence follows these geometric principles.
So the next time you see a spider's web glistening with morning dew, arranged in perfect geometric spirals, remember, you're not just observing sacred geometry, you're participating in it. You are it. Thank you for joining us for this exploration into the patterns that shape our world and ourselves.
Ab immemorabili, from time beyond memory.
Until next time, keep questioning, keep growing.
And remember, the wisdom you seek has always been within you.
You're not learning it,
You're remembering it.